At the time of writing this script, it's early August 2020, and Nintendo still hasn't shared any plans for future releases, or even plans to announce said plans for future releases. It's a weird and uneasy time to be a Nintendo fan for sure, especially a fan like me, who makes a good deal of content on the topic of said releases, and announcements of said releases. Though Nintendo hasn't officially disclosed what future releases they have in store for 2020 beyond Pikmin 3 Deluxe this October, there have been rumors in circulation since March coming from all sorts of different sources that Nintendo is planning a sort of sequel to Super Mario All-Stars that would be a compilation of all of Mario's major 3D outings. They say it will include Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy. And these supposed leakers haven't made it clear, or simply can't agree, as to whether or not Super Mario Galaxy 2 and Super Mario 3D World will be included, and it also isn't clear as to whether or not the games included will be completely remade from the ground up, like the remakes of Spyro, Crash, and Medieval, or simply rezzed up and made widescreen and all that jazz. Regardless of what form this collection takes, or whether or not it's real at all, I am personally all for a compilation release of legacy Nintendo games for the Switch, and heck, I think I'm down with compilation releases of pretty much any kind of games on the Switch, especially considering how Nintendo doesn't plan on implementing a virtual console on the system, despite pretty much everyone wanting it, but whatever. Not to mention how unbearably slow the distribution of new games on the SNES and NES Nintendo Switch Online apps are. With all this in mind, I can really only view Nintendo's redistribution of their legacy titles through other means as a positive, especially when it's in a physical release so that we can play it at any time and actually own it, unlike the online apps. And such collections would have extra value if they're done in the same vein as Kirby's 20th Anniversary Dream Collection on the Wii, where it includes a bunch of trivia, artwork, extras, and other stuff to make the package feel more substantial. And this leads me into the topic of today's video, where I'd like to share 10 collections I would like to see come to the Switch. Before we begin, however, let me just mention that I will not be including the rumored 3D Mario collection, or any collection of games that would more than likely be multi-platform should they ever come about, like a potential Mario vs. Capcom, like a potential Marvel vs. Capcom collection, or Sega Dreamcast collection. But oh man, could you imagine. Number 1, Pikmin Trilogy. To be completely honest, I wrote the script for this video before Pikmin 3 Deluxe was announced. I snuck it in there at the beginning. I replaced Paper Mario with Pikmin 3, but yeah. Pikmin Trilogy is definitely not happening now that 3 is going to be a $60 standalone game. But the first two as a pack-in for $60 would be okay, I guess, considering GameCube games were in vogue and that would be valuing them each at $30. Yeah, I had a lot more to say about how we need the first Pikmin games to come out so that people have something to play before Pikmin 4, despite how the Pikmin franchise isn't really known for how well it implements continuity, but, you know, life happens. Number 2, Metroid Prime Trilogy. Unlike a potential Pikmin trilogy, which, again, isn't happening, doing this off script, the Metroid Prime Trilogy already exists, both as a physical release on the Wii and a digital release of said game for the Wii U. Scaling the games up to HD would be expected if it were to come to Switch, and obviously the motion controls would have to be reworked, preferably with a gyro control scheme, compatible with the Pro Controller, and that would, of course, mean putting in some extra work to get the game in a playable state for the Switch, but I think the investment it would take would definitely pay off. Unlike most Nintendo franchises, the Metroid Prime series makes a good use of, and on some level depends upon, its narrative continuity. Metroid Prime 4 is confirmed to be in development for the Switch with Retro Studios at the helm, and it's going to take some time and then some to get it ready for sure. So in the meantime, Nintendo ought to get a smaller team working on HDifying the visuals and retooling the controls for Metroid Prime Trilogy, because the Switch's giant, massive install base is going to want to start their Metroid Prime journey at the very best place to start, the beginning. Number 3, FZero 30th Anniversary Collection. Next year will mark 30 years since FZero graced the SNES in 1991. Along the way in those past 30 years, FZero hasn't had nearly as many entries as some of Nintendo's other franchises, like Mario, Zelda, Kirby, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, or Aunt Harriet's Running Joke Adventure, but it has had enough entries to build up a pretty impressive library of fast-paced, quality, hardcore racing titles. The first game on the SNES, FZero X on the N64, and the expansion kit for the N64 disk drive, FZero Maximum Velocity on the Game Boy Advance, FZero AX at the arcades, FZero GX on the GameCube, a couple other anime tie-ins also on Game Boy Advance, and a Wii U title made by the Burnout developers. Oh, wait! Just kidding! That one didn't end up happening. It is technically possible to include every FZero title ever released on one Nintendo Switch cartridge, but realistically, it's a darn pipe dream. And a darn near impossible pipe dream at that. Nintendo, for whatever reason, doesn't like acknowledging the F-Zero franchise. Miyamoto actually once said something to the effect of the reason that there haven't been any new entries since the GameCube days is simply because they can't see any way to significantly evolve the formula. Putting my frustration with that sentiment aside, I heavily disagree with it. I could see the plausibility of getting either a collection that includes either the first 5 games, or at the very least a compilation of all the content from GX and AX in HD, with online support. At this point, I think I might even be happy with a remake of F-Zero X expansion kit. I am desperate for more F-Zero games, Nintendo, and so are millions of your customers, I'm sure. And next year marks the series' 30th anniversary for Pico's sake. Give us something, anything at all, we're begging ya. Number 4, Virtual Boy Collection. The Virtual Boy was a massive flop that lives in infamy across the gaming landscape. 1993 just wasn't ready for VR, but just because the system was flawed doesn't mean that the games made for it don't have value. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Because of how poorly it sold, very few copies of the games for the Virtual Boy were ever made. Same goes for the Virtual Boy itself, really. Many people may never get the opportunity to play any of the few Virtual Boy games released unless Nintendo re-releases them in some form. Though some major retooling will probably have to be done if you want the games to be presentable in the modern day. A lot of people may be put off by the red and black monochromatic look of the games, so upgraded visuals as an option at least would be very much appreciated should a collection ever come about. But what games would be included in such a compilation? There were only ever 22 games released on the system in total, but a good number of them were licensed games. So if we're going to strictly stick to the games that Nintendo developed and published, then it would realistically include Virtual Boy Wario Land, Tellero Boxer, Galactic Pinball, Mario Clash, Mario's Tennis, Nestor's Funky Bowling, Red Alarm, and just to give it a little extra value, I think they should finish some of the cancelled games, like the Star Fox, Mario Kart, Dragon Hopper, and F-Zero titles. I don't think it's unrealistic to ask for this. They put Star Fox 2 on the SNES Mini, and we know that it only took a team of 7 to get F-Zero running on the SNES back in the day, and it only took like a month or a couple of months to make Mario 64. So while it's probably not a very likely instance to happen, I think it would be super fun to get a Virtual Boy collection on the Nintendo Switch. Also, Labo VR support would be a really nice touch. Number 5, Mother Trilogy. If you are unaware of the ravenous demand Western Nintendo fans have for the release of the third and final Mother game released on the Game Boy Advance that Nintendo has acknowledged it still won't oblige them with that has stayed Japan exclusive for so long, let me start by saying, I envy you. I'm sure the cost of living under a rock is way less expensive than a Southern California studio apartment. But in all seriousness, the Mother franchise is composed of 3 very beautiful, innovative, charming, heartfelt, and captivating hometown-centered RPGs. The fact that the first entry is relegated exclusively to the Wii U eShop, and the second entry isn't offered on the Switch's SNES Online app, and the third entry, still, after all this time, isn't available outside of Japan, it really makes me think that either Nintendo and or Toei don't want us to play Mother games, or they're gearing up for a collection release sometime in the future. We know for sure that the Mother franchise isn't completely dead, seeing as how there's the Mother Hobonichi project currently happening, which is getting a new manga series and some merchandise off the ground. So please let us experience the first 3 games while we're at it, pretty please, Nintendo? And if you could go the extra mile by completely remaking them to reflect this clay model aesthetic from the artwork, that would be an inspired decision. Number 6, Dillons' Rolling Western Trilogy. You know, a lot of these are trilogies. That's probably just a coincidence, but either way, this budget line of sandbox/tower defense games starring anthropomorphic animals in a semi-futuristic western frontier town on the 3DS family of systems is one that shouldn't be ignored. They are very unique games, and the last entry was sort of let out to die on the 3DS at the very end of its life, in 2018. Sheesh. If you feel bad about Samus Returns not making a lot of sales, imagine how Dillons' Dead Heat Breakers must feel. Ouch. Number 7, Pokemon Gotta Catch 'Em All Collection. This one's a bit of a doozy and very concept heavy, so give me a second here to explain what it is. Essentially, the idea behind it is to give Pokemon fans a way to both revisit the past titles they love so dearly, and also make it easier for them to fill out the Pokédex, in light of the new Dex restrictions being implemented in the newest games. Considering that the Kanto games were once bundled in free with Stadium on the frickin' N64, and Gold, Silver, and Crystal are only $10 a pop on 3DS Virtual Console, I don't think it's unreasonable to price a collection that includes Gens 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with updated online and trading capabilities for $60 on the Switch. I stopped just short of X and Y and the subsequent releases, because I feel like Game Freak and the Pokemon Company probably still view the 3DS as a big enough revenue generator. So those games can wait another however many years before being included in a compilation of their own. Although this compilation would undoubtedly sell gangbusters, the Pokemon Company probably see more value in just making more remakes and Let's Go games instead. I miss old Pokemon. Number 8. Some kind of Legend of Zelda collection. Nintendo values their Zelda re-releases very, very, very highly. They sold slightly prettier versions of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess on the Wii U for $60 and $50 respectively. And if you think that's a little much, they also sold a remake of Link's Awakening for a full $60 on the Switch. I mean, it's one thing to charge $40 for remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on 3DS. In that case, you're paying for the convenience as well as the updated graphics, not to mention the game itself. But it's another thing entirely to do that with a substantially less complex game like Link's Awakening DX for a full $60, just because it's a first-party release on the Switch. But that's a topic for another time. While it may not be likely, I think that a $60 release, or even a $70 release, if we're fudging things, that includes remakes of every 3D Zelda from Ocarina of Time to Skyward Sword, would be perfectly reasonable, and a sales juggernaut, no question. But if not a 3D remake compilation, then a 2D remake compilation that includes all the 2D Zeldas, including the Capcom-developed ones, would also suffice. Heck, you can probably get away with just remaking the Capcom-developed ones, or even just Minish Cap. Sometimes I just don't get why Nintendo price things the way they do. Oh wait, for the money. Pfft, duh. Number 9. Paper Mario Collection, aka Mario Story Trilogy. The story-based Paper Mario RPGs of old have all but disappeared so far as Nintendo's concerned. Series director Kinsuke Tanabe has confirmed that they are creatively constricted when making new Paper Mario games, in terms of how they design their characters, how much story they're allowed to have, etc, etc. Who set these constrictions? We don't really know for sure. It's Miyamoto. Nevertheless, it is a crying shame, and I have expressed my sorrow in both a dedicated video I made before Origami King's release, and a Stadium Rock power ballad parody of a song from a musical that nobody's seen after its release. While it may be a long time, or gosh, maybe even never, till we get a true Paper Mario sequel, it might be a little more reasonable to get a compilation of the first 2 or 3 games. I'd be equally happy with having the first 2 in a release as well as I would having all 3. But because it only makes mathematical sense that more people would rather have all 3, I'll go ahead and include Super Paper Mario in my wish for a Paper Mario collection. Why not? Now, I haven't been ordering these entries in any kind of set order, up until now anyway, because this last entry is one that I want more than any other collection ever. Paper Mario was a close second, but my first, absolute, most primary, undoubtedly most wanted compilation release for the Switch is... the one that I will disclose right after some honorable mentions. Yay! Wario Land Gold Collection. I already did a larger video outlining a potential year of Wario that details my hopes for a Wario Land Collection game among lots of other Wario things, so check it out after this video if you're interested. Donkey Kong Country Kong-lection. Include the SNES Trilogy, 64 Jungle Beat, and Returns in one big package, please. If not, then just remake the SNES Trilogy from the ground up, and maybe even 64, that'd be swell. 2D Metroid Compilation. Why not? Star Fox Compilation. Why not? Box Boy Compilation. Why? Fossil Fighters Collection. Just the first 2, the last one's garbage. Golden Sun Collection. Just the first 2, the last one's garbage. Kirby's Other Dream Collection. Same as the one on Wii, but with the 3DS games and Return to Dreamland also thrown in. Chibi Robo Collection. Just the first 2, the last one's blows. Wii Sports / Play Collection. Just compile all those glorious motion-controlled mini-games in one convenient package. Throw in a couple Bluetooth Wii remotes too if the Joy-Cons just don't suffice for whatever reason. NES Remix 3. Not technically a collection, but if we do ever get a third NES Remix, I would want it to have all the content from the first 2 games. So just thought I'd give it an honorable mention here. And finally, now that the honorable mentions are done, let's move on to my most wanted Nintendo You gotta be careful when you're reading your lines. You've gotta pace yourself. Breathe. Think about what you're saying. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. Do you remember your lines? You're supposed to... Let's move on to my most wanted Nintendo game compilation for the Switch. Number 1, Custom Robo Collection. Custom Robo has a strange relationship with Nintendo. It's always been a series that they've published, with Noise/Studio Fake serving as the developers, and the series has enjoyed moderate success in Japan, but they didn't start releasing any games in the West until Custom Robo Battle Revolution on the GameCube, or as we know it here in America, just Custom Robo. This game is one of my all-time favorites, for many reasons. The designs, the premise, the combat, the customization options, the chaotic yet fair-feeling multiplayer, the engaging single-player campaign, it's just so wonderful. Custom Robo Arena on the DS isn't nearly as great as the GameCube release, but it's more Custom Robo, so it's still pretty good. And of course, the N64 and Game Boy Advance games, which, haven't made it to the States yet. There was a scare a couple years ago that Nintendo let the trademark for the Custom Robo series expire, but thankfully, it was only for the GameCube game, in relation to optical compact discs no less. And the Switch uses cartridges, so we should be all good, right? Plus, we got 4 Custom Robo Spirits and a Ray Mark III Mii costume in Smash Ultimate, so Nintendo definitely still has domain over the IP. And while my personal dream is for a brand new entry to come to the Switch, I'd still be very appreciative of a physical release compilation of all 5 games, regardless of whether or not they're remade or just up-resed, though I would expect the Japan-exclusive games to be translated, of course. And thus concludes my list. What collections would you like to see come to the Switch? Do you think we're getting that 3D Mario collection this year? Are you mad that I implied that Golden Sun Dark Dawn is garbage? Whatever you have to say, go ahead and say it in the comments below. And if you're not good with words, but would still like to tell me that you've enjoyed this video and or my content on this channel, then hit that little bitty button that looks like a human hand giving a thumbs up, and press that big old button that says, subscribe. And if you're feeling particularly generous, share this video with whomever else you think might enjoy it. Thanks again for your support, everybody. Until next time, I will see you the next time I see you.